Humiliated, Sandra grabbed the pot from her mother's hands and in a moment of rage poured the soup over them, her voice cold and unrecognizable. "If your daughter is missing, go and look for her elsewhere. I am not your daughter." Leaving her parents drenched and shattered, the scent of spilled soup and bitter betrayal hanging in the air. In the heart of a small village, Papa Tunde and Mama Joy lived a life woven with love, hope, and an unshakable bond. For years, they had tried to welcome a child into their lives, only to lose each one, heartbreak after heartbreak. Now, as Mama Joy's belly swelled with their ninth child, Papa Tunde held on to hope like never before. He placed his hand on her growing belly, his voice thick with emotion. "This child must stay," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Our children can't keep leaving us like this." Mama Joy, sitting in the quiet of their modest room, was filled with a mixture of hope and fear. The village midwife had told her that if she lost this child, her womb would no longer be able to bear life. She knew this would be her last chance. Every kick, every little flutter reminded her that life was growing within her. But doubt lingered, mingling with her prayers. "Please God, show me favor," Mama Joy prayed each night, her tears soaking her pillow. As the pregnancy moved into its 8th month, she began to feel a cautious certainty that this time the outcome would be different. It was as if she could already hear the distant cry of her child in her heart. Weeks passed, and finally, on a rainy evening, the time came. Pain swept through her, each wave bringing her closer to the child she so desperately wanted. The village midwife was there, guiding her through every push, every breath, until at last the sound they had yearned to hear echoed through their home, a baby's cry, piercing and strong. A healthy baby girl, Sandra, was born. Papa Tunde and Mama Joy held her close, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. Sandra was their miracle, a child they vowed to protect and cherish. Despite their humble lifestyle, they gave Sandra all they could, instilling in her values of kindness and respect for others. Papa Tunde and Mama Joy didn't have much, but they poured every ounce of love and effort into raising their only child, Sandra. To them, she was a precious gift, a miracle they held as gently as one would cradle an egg. Sandra was not only their joy, but also the embodiment of their dreams and hopes for a better future. Despite their humble lives, Papa Tunde and Mama Joy worked tirelessly, taking on any job they could find to provide for Sandra. They wanted her to have a chance at the life they had only ever dreamed of, a life where hardship didn't overshadow every opportunity. Papa Tunde often looked at Sandra, pride filling his eyes as he spoke with conviction. "You are all we have, Sandra," he would say, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "My greatest wish is to see you finish school here and go to the university in the city one day. No one from our village has ever reached that far, but I know you can do it. You're different. You're special." Sandra's face would light up, her heart swelling with love and determination. She would look back at her father, his unwavering faith in her lifting her spirits. "Papa," she replied with a smile, "I will never let you down." And Sandra kept her word. She excelled in school, quickly becoming the pride of her village. Her teachers admired her intelligence and drive, while her classmates looked up to her. Every test she passed, every report card she brought home was a testament to her promise. Her parents beamed with pride, sharing stories of Sandra's achievements with anyone who would listen. When Sandra's secondary school results arrived, the entire family gathered around, hearts pounding with anticipation. As her father opened the envelope, his face lit up with pride. Sandra had not only passed, but excelled, ranking among the top students. Their humble home erupted in joy, each of them savoring this hard-earned triumph. Yet, beneath their smiles, a shadow of worry loomed. How could they afford the university fees that would turn Sandra's dreams into reality? The farm, their primary source of income, had not yielded much in recent years. Droughts, rising costs, and unpredictable harvests had made even the simplest meals a challenge. Still, they knew they couldn't let Sandra's talents go to waste. Mama Joy, determined to help, gathered her few prized possessions, colorful, well-worn cloths she had saved for special occasions. She sold them, but the money was nowhere near enough. Seeing his wife's sacrifice, Papa Tunde realized there was only one choice left. They would have to sell the small piece of land they owned. It was their last asset, the one piece of security they had hoped to pass on to Sandra someday. With a heavy heart, he made the arrangements, signing over their land to a buyer who offered just enough to cover Sandra's tuition and basic expenses. Before Sandra left, her father pulled her aside, his eyes filled with both pride and the weight of his sacrifice. "Sandra," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "this land was meant for you, for your future, but your education, that is a far greater legacy. Promise us you will honor this chance." Tears filled Sandra's eyes as she embraced her parents, feeling the depth of their love and sacrifice. "Papa, Mama, I promise I will make you proud. I will never forget where I come from or the sacrifices you've made." With that, Sandra left for university, carrying the weight of her parents' hopes on her shoulders. Sandra stepped onto the university campus, feeling as though she had entered an entirely different world, one where she didn't quite belong. Her clothes, carefully sewn by her mother, were simple, worn, and noticeably out of place among the bright, fashionable outfits of her classmates. The confidence she once felt seemed to vanish, replaced by a feeling of inferiority that followed her everywhere she went. She tried to blend in, but her classmates noticed her quiet demeanor and outmoded clothes. She found herself isolated, with only her parents as her true friends. The first few months were hard. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her studies and the stark contrast between her life and that of her classmates, Sandra called her parents often, crying that she wanted to come back home. "Papa, Mama," she whispered over the phone, trying to hold back tears. "It's so different here. I don't fit in. Everyone seems so polished, so confident. I can't bear it any longer." Her parents listened patiently, their hearts aching for their daughter. Mama Joy spoke to her gently. "Sandra, my child, we didn't sell everything we had for you to give up now. You have a chance here that others can only dream of. There is nothing back in the village for you. Stay strong, my daughter." Sandra wiped her tears and, with her parents' encouragement, decided to push through, dedicating herself fully to her studies. She threw herself into her books, finding comfort in the familiarity of hard work and the promise that her education held. By the end of the first term, she had settled into a rhythm, and though she still felt out of place, her grades spoke for her, earning the respect of her professors. When the term ended, she returned home to her parents, who welcomed her with open arms, delighted to see her progress. But during that break, Sandra thought about the life she had left behind on campus. She had observed how the rich girls on campus carried themselves, their clothes, their makeup, their confidence. Determined to fit in and elevate her status, Sandra made a decision. Before returning to school, she asked her parents for extra money, claiming it was for books and essential supplies. Her parents, though struggling, gathered the funds, sacrificing even more to support their daughter. Little did they know, Sandra had something else in mind. Once she was back at university, she used the money to completely revamp her wardrobe, buying clothes and accessories that mirrored those of the wealthy girls on campus. The change was drastic. Gone was the humble, quiet girl from the village. Sandra reappeared on campus as a strikingly fashionable young woman, her clothes and demeanor fitting in with the high-class students she had once envied. Her transformation caught the attention of many, and she quickly gained friends who were intrigued by her new confidence and style. As she integrated more into this new circle, the values her parents had instilled in her started to fade. Her humility was replaced by a sense of pride, her once pure intentions clouded by a desire to be admired and accepted. The sacrifice her parents had made became an afterthought as she slipped further into the high-class lifestyle she had once only observed from the sidelines. But underneath the glamour and newfound attention, Sandra began to feel the weight of her choices. The money her parents sent was never quite enough to keep up with her new lifestyle, and soon she found herself asking them for more, spinning tales of extra fees and unexpected expenses. Her parents, unaware of the change in their daughter, continued to support her, pushing their own limits to give Sandra what they thought she needed for her education. Sandra had fully embraced her new life on campus. With her status as the girlfriend of Albert, one of the wealthiest students at the university, she became the envy of every girl around. They were inseparable, known for riding in his luxurious cars and spending weekends in the expensive hall he rented just for her. Sandra had become the epitome of elegance and sophistication, far from the humble girl her parents once knew. When the day of graduation arrived, Sandra called her parents briefly, announcing her completion, but insisting there was no need for them to attend. Mama Joy and Papa Tunde, despite her request, decided to surprise her. They wanted to witness the moment they had sacrificed so much for, their only daughter's success. With pride in their hearts, they dressed in their best, Mama Joy carrying a pot of Sandra's favorite soup and fufu, hoping to make the day even more special. When they arrived on campus, they felt a mix of excitement and awe. The large, bustling crowd of students and families was overwhelming, and they didn't quite know where to start. Eventually, they asked a group of students if they knew where Sandra was, introducing themselves as her parents. The students looked at them with confusion. "But the only Sandra we know here has parents who live abroad," one of them replied, a hint of disbelief in their voices. This response repeated itself as they asked several others, leaving them bewildered and saddened. Just as they began to lose hope, they spotted Sandra in the distance, standing with Albert and a group of friends. Overcome with joy, Mama Joy raised her voice, calling out, "Sandra, my daughter!" All heads turned to see the couple approaching. Sandra, caught off guard, felt her stomach drop. She stood frozen as her parents reached her, their faces beaming with pride. "Sandra, we've been looking all around for you," Papa Tunde said, his voice filled with joy. "We wanted to surprise you on this special day." One of Sandra's friends turned to her, puzzled. "Sandra, I thought your parents were in abroad. Who are these people?" Sandra's heart raced as panic set in. Overcome with embarrassment and anger, she snapped at her parents. "Are you all right? Who is your daughter? Where do you know me from?" Mama Joy's face fell, her joy turning to disbelief. "Sandra, what do you mean by that? Have you forgotten your mother and father? I even prepared your favorite soup for you." Laughter and murmurs began to ripple through the gathered crowd as Sandra's friends exchanged glances. After throwing the soup on her parents, Sandra turned and walked away. Mama Joy stood motionless, struggling to understand what had just happened. Her heart felt as though it had been torn in two, and in a moment of unbearable sorrow, she collapsed onto the ground. Papa Tunde and a few students rushed to her side, pouring water on her face until she regained consciousness, her eyes still glazed with pain. Albert, who had watched everything in silence, finally stepped forward. Seeing the devastation on their faces, he felt a pang of guilt, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. Without a word, he offered to take them to the bus station, guiding them to his car. Mama Joy sobbed softly throughout the drive, unable to contain her heartbreak. As they reached the station, she cried out, her voice choked with tears. "Sandra, I carried you for 9 months. Is this how you repay us? We have suffered, we have sacrificed, we have remained poor so you could have a better life. How could you turn your back on us?" Her words echoed in the quiet car, each one a reminder of the love they had poured into Sandra. Albert, who had stayed silent, was left disturbed by the raw grief he had witnessed, the painful truth of the sacrifices her parents had made now clear. For Mama Joy and Papa Tunde, the bus ride back to the village was filled with silence, each mile marking the distance between them and the daughter they had loved and lost. Back in the village, Mama Joy fell ill, her strength drained by the heartbreak and humiliation she had endured. Days passed in silence as she lay in bed, her eyes fixed on the thatched ceiling, replaying the memory of Sandra's rejection over and over. Papa Tunde, usually the pillar of strength, moved through each day with a distant look in his eyes, his spirit visibly crushed. Neighbors noticed their silence and asked how Sandra's graduation had gone, but neither he nor Mama Joy could bring themselves to answer. The pride they had once felt had turned into a sorrow too deep to share. Meanwhile, back in the city, Sandra found herself wrestling with guilt. A part of her was haunted by the image of her parents' faces, the shame in her mother's eyes, and the look of betrayal on her father's face. She tried to push the memories away, but they lingered, gnawing at her. Albert, however, seemed changed after that day. He grew distant and rarely called, keeping their conversations brief and impersonal. One day, he took her out for lunch, and as they finished their meal, he looked at her with an expression that was both resigned and disappointed. "Sandra," he said quietly, "I've rented an apartment for you. You'll be comfortable there, but it's over between us." Sandra was stunned, her heart sinking at his words. "Why, Albert? What happened?" Albert looked away, unwilling to explain further. "I just think we're different people than I thought," he replied simply, his voice detached. He offered no other reason, leaving her with an aching sense of finality. Though hurt and confused, Sandra forced herself to stay calm, assuring herself that life was just beginning. She had come so far after all. She was young, educated, and free from the restrictions of her past. With or without Albert, she could thrive. She pushed the memories of her parents, the painful scenes from graduation, and even Albert's departure into the recesses of her mind. She told herself it was time to focus on her new life, to embrace her independence. In the quiet of their small home, Mama Joy watched helplessly as her husband, once strong and full of life, lay in bed, his body weakened by illness. Papa Tunde had always been the silent pillar, enduring quietly, hiding his pain and disappointment over Sandra's rejection. He bore the burden alone, telling himself that he needed to stay strong for Mama Joy, even as heartbreak and unspoken resentment slowly wore him down. Unbeknownst to him, he had developed hypertension, his constant worry and bottled up emotions adding to his silent suffering. One morning, as he prepared to head to the farm, he suddenly collapsed, his body struck down by a stroke. From that moment, Papa Tunde could no longer move or speak, leaving Mama Joy to shoulder the burden alone. Life became a daily struggle. With her husband immobilized, she worked herself to exhaustion just to keep food on the table. In the village, people started whispering, questioning Sandra's absence. They wondered aloud why the young woman, who had been the pride of her parents, hadn't returned to help them. "Where is Sandra?" they murmured. "Why hasn't she come to care for her parents in their time of need?" The words stung Mama Joy, cutting deeper into the open wound that Sandra had left. She tried to ignore them, focusing on her husband's care, but the burden weighed on her. Seeing no other choice, she finally decided to call Sandra, hoping that her daughter might set aside her pride, if only for a moment, to come home and see her ailing father. Mama Joy's hands trembled as she dialed Sandra's number. The first call went unanswered, and a hollow feeling settled in her heart. She tried again, and this time Sandra picked up. Her voice was cold, devoid of the warmth Mama Joy had once known. "Hello?" Sandra said, her tone impatient. Mama Joy began, her voice weak and pleading. "My daughter, Sandra, your father is dying. He's been sick in bed for so long. I've tried everything I can, but he's not getting any better. We need you, Sandra." Before Mama Joy could finish, Sandra interrupted, her words sharp and cruel. "Am I a doctor, Mama? Do I look like one? If you want to kill your husband like you did with all your other children before me, then go ahead, but don't involve me in your witchcraft." Mama Joy froze, her heart shattering at her daughter's words. She felt the weight of Sandra's accusation like a physical blow, and tears streamed down her face. "Sandra, are you really using my pain against me? The pain that almost broke me?" But before she could say another word, Sandra cut the call, leaving her mother holding the phone in silence, a void where hope had once been. The weight of her daughter's cruelty was too much to bear. Mama Joy sank to the floor, sobbing until there were no tears left. The memories of her long, painful journey, the miscarriages, the heartbreak, the endless prayers for Sandra's survival, played through her mind like a haunting melody. This was the child she had endured it all for, the one she had fought so hard to keep alive. Broken, angry, and consumed by a sense of betrayal, Mama Joy raised her hands in despair and through her sobs uttered a curse. "May you never know peace, Sandra. May the world show you the same heartlessness you have shown to us. May you be haunted by the pain you have caused until the day you realize the weight of a mother's tears." With those words, the pain and anguish that had been trapped inside her found a voice, and as the curse hung in the air, a sense of emptiness washed over her, leaving her with only the hollow ache of a mother's love turned to sorrow. And so, with a mother's curse cast upon her only child, the stage was set for fate to take its course. But will this curse truly follow Sandra? Will she feel the weight of her mother's anguish? How will Sandra's life unfold now, as she drifts further from the family that sacrificed everything for her? Will regret find her too late, or will she ever realize the depth of the love she turned her back on? Watch out for part 2. Thank you.